Good morning, everybody. It's exactly 9 a.m. We had a bit of a false start, so I was talking to empty space for a while. So let's redo this. It's 9 a.m., so we're right on time. I hope everybody can hear us. If you can, I would appreciate if a couple of you can type it into the window, so to speak, in the chat window, so that we know we can actually hear you. This morning I'm with Luigi de Munnik, the business operations specialist in DOCO.
Hello.
And with Peter Sarangi, who is also with us in DOCO, who's the master of the webinar, so to speak, just in case anything goes wrong. What we're going to do is we're going to run an intro on the BOS. Some of you might actually have already heard it. Luigi and I have done, well, how many, Luigi? I think over hundreds of these. Yeah. We have a new version of this, but anyway, some of you might have heard it. Many of you won't have heard it. After our presentation, it's 20 minutes probably, 20-30 minutes. Then we'll have a case study from Moldova, who actually did a BOS. So you hear from a field office who actually engaged in that process. And after that, we hear from Brazil. Moldova and Brazil each have 10 minutes to highlight their experiences. After that, we got a Q&A. We're trying to aim for this webinar for 1 hour, 15 minutes, maybe 1.5 hours. Depends a little bit how many questions there are. And then we'll just take it from there. So let's get started. You can just click through the slides, right?
Oh, first Jens's video.
Okay.
Dear colleagues, I'm sure that you have heard a lot about the 2030 agenda. And that agenda is probably the most exciting.
Okay, guys, sorry for that. I can see the chat box overflowing with people who can see the beautiful face of our deputy administrator. We're saying all kinds of good stuff, but you can't hear it. So we're going to try to fix it, run it one more time. If you still can't hear it, then do it in the type it in the chat box. If that doesn't work, we're just going to continue with the presentation. Okay, Peter? Yeah.
Okay, so we're restarting the webinar with the video of Jens Lundell. And please let us know if you can't hear anything.
Dear colleagues, I'm sure that you have heard a lot about the 2030 agenda. And that agenda is probably the most exciting that we've seen for a long time. It will also impact the way we operate, the way we do the business. We're still discussing the exact implications. So what I will share with you is some views on where I think we're going, and I hope that will form a good basis for a discussion. Essentially, I think we running the UN country teams will be judged from an operational point of view for speed, for cost, and for competence. And what is shifting here is that the 2030 Universal Agenda insists that we are, in a way, present, but it also is much more partnership oriented. A lot of other organizations than the United Nations start doing the kind of things we do. So to remain relevant, we have to be better at it. And being better at it also means being operationally more efficient. It is quite likely that a universally present UN is molded in such a way so the front end is the programmatic competency, whatever that means. And then we will run of some kind of unified back end. Universal will also mean that a lot of the transactions will not happen in country any longer. Many parts of a payment, many parts of a hire, many parts of a procurement, managing in the cloud, etc. These are all terms and systemic terms that implies that these things can be done from wherever they could be done. In the UNDP case, it could be Copenhagen, Malaysia, or regional centers. But the rest of the UN is also building similar centers. Let me take it down a notch. We have today the business operation strategy. It is, in a sense, the operational equivalent to our UNDAFs, or maybe in the future, our United Nations Sustainable Development Frameworks. The business operation strategy is a logical consequence of saying, okay, if we're going to do certain things together, how do we best operate together? What we have found in a recent midterm evaluation is that there is real savings. But most of the savings right now are found in very specific areas that all share the same characteristic, that they are services to the portfolio. So they are travel services, they are ICT HR services, there are also some procurement services where we have created a lot of savings doing those. We have also seen another barrier, and that is the kind of collaboration that requires that each agency or all agencies will have to tell it bluntly, fire some people to realize their saving. That part is the hard part. In other words, a lot of the agencies, probably including UNDP, have some difficulties in really changing and therefore realizing potential savings. Finally, I would say that apart from business operation strategy, doing things together, we also observe that we start doing thematically things together. What do I mean by that? It is greening. We start seeing a lot of us coming together around green premises, and some offices are moving ahead now with common fleet management, including experimenting with efficiency cars, but also just sharing cars, etc. So in summary, I think that we will see a higher pressure for operating together. I think that we should work towards recognizing each other's business processes instead of just harmonizing to one process. And it seems to me that being lead agency or the lead agency model is going to be the dominating model, and it will be sometimes UNDP, it will be sometimes other UN organizations that has the best business process for whatever we are trying to achieve. I hope you will enjoy the discussion as things move forward, and I'm sorry I can't be with you in person.
Okay. Okay, everybody, that was Jens Wandel, Wandel, as the Danish would say. He's the chair of the working group, the UNDG, basically that's governing all the interagency business operations together with UNESCO, Jean-Yves Le Saux. both quite excellent chairs, driving hard to transform the business operations landscape. Now, I won't go on into detail on that during this presentation. I want to recommend that you guys visit the UNDG website. There's a business operations section in there that's very well maintained. There's a thing called a position paper there that will give the 2030 vision of the UNDG on business operations. It's quite good stuff. It's quite far out of the box, but that vision paper underpins most of the work that the working group is currently undertaking. So check it on the website and give it a read. It is quite interesting. So moving forward. As you probably have noticed, we have a new thing called the SDGs being introduced in the last year. There's also on the UNDG blog website, it's called Silo Fighters. There's a blog that recently was drafted by our team here on the links between the programs and the operations. The SDGs introduce a whole new range of the way in which we actually deliver programs. It talks about a lot of larger transformations in terms of program delivery. It talks about decentralized program delivery, universality, that the UN needs to be there where the most needy are at the community levels. It talks about a data revolution, which clearly uses real-time data to inform policy making and the work you're doing in terms of programming at the country level. And a great example of that, you saw it with the Ebola crisis, where the responding agencies, UNDP, WHO, I think WFP, UNICEF, they were using real-time data gathered from mobile phones from people that were moving around, in this case Liberia, and they used that data to set up camps and mobile hospitals to be able to support those people that were actually infected with Ebola. Now, no need to say, if they don't do that, Ebola would have spread all over the place, and that would have caused a cataclysm of the magnitude that we've rarely seen. Now, that is an example of real-time data and how it can inform programs. But all these things, all these new partnerships, they're talking about a workforce worthy of the 21st century, but which has like a whole transformed new skill set. These are all great things, but the thing that struck us, this was a year ago, it's like nobody was talking about how business operations needs to evolve with that program role. It is all great that we want to be in a universal character, that we want to be in all the communities, we want to see a data revolution, we're going to have the best people. But how are we going to do that? And in order to make that happen, the business operations function needs to transform as well, because currently, for many of these things, we're not geared to actually achieve that and help our program colleagues to actually make that happen. So all these changes introduced by the SDGs, they do have massive implications for the business operations. And again, the position paper I referred to before gives a bit of that vision. It's a high-level vision, but you'll see year by year, you see innovations being introduced by the UNDG and the HLCM to help deliver this kind of transformations. So do not be fooled if people talk about the SDGs. It concerns us business operations staff as much as it does program. If we do not transform, then the program will not be able to transform at all. And it's very, very important people start realizing and getting that message. We have to move with that agenda. Now, the good news is, after the whole delivering as one pilot got evaluated, I think, what was it, 2012, 2011?
Yeah.
Okay, we're supposed to know that. Let's put it at 2011. There was an independent evaluation of the DAO, and what struck me, I mean, I was based in Papua New Guinea at the time, that there was nothing. I mean, the program had new approaches, the fund had new approaches, we had communications that was new, doing new things, but the thing that hadn't moved at all was business operations. It was still business as usual, some common services, some common premises. Nobody knew really what was going on at the country level. There was no overview whatsoever, leave alone that there was a medium-term strategic vision that would drive at the country level, like, okay, how does operations need to evolve to be able to support the program, which is why we're there in the first place. Somehow this got incredibly siloed. Now the DAO evaluation was pretty blistering on it, and it was a good thing, because the purpose of that very hard conclusion was to trigger the system into change for business operations. Now, how that changes was in the QCPR, where the new QCPR, currently there's a new one under construction. The current one will end this year. But this QCPR was very strong on business operations. It was pushing on so many levels for the system to move forward that we've rarely seen a mandate this strong. Now the QCPR, for those of you who don't know exactly what that is, I cannot explain it in detail because of lack of time, but the short of it is that is what the member states in the General Assembly and in the ECOSOC are telling the UN system in the coming 4 years, this is what you're going to do. That's basically the starting point for the funds and programs, not necessarily the specialized agencies. They align with the QCPR, but it is an incredibly important document and often triggering UN country teams into action. So the QCPR picked that up and started like pushing for business operations. So how was that then picked up? UNDG saw that QCPR mandate coming through and saw the push in general for delivering as one to be scaled, and in particular for business operations to be pushed. So they developed a thing called the SOPs. It's a standard operating procedures for DAO. I'm personally not too happy with the title. SOPs are, in my eyes, take a bit of a different format, but that's what it is. The SOPs, they have 5 pillars. There's the one leader, which many of you will know the pillars anyway, but it's the one leader, which is the RC and the UNCT. It's the one program, the common budgetary framework, communicating as one, and in our incredibly biased vision, the most important one, operating as one. Now, the BOS, which we're about to tell you about, sits on operating as one. And the message I want to tell you here is that 18 executive heads actually signed off on the SOPs and are looking forward to the country scaling the SOPs at a country level. And I'm telling you this because I had never-ending, well, that's a little bit negative. I had very challenging moments where you're actually standing in front of a UNCT and you get one agency or the other saying, oh, but I can't do it because of my headquarters or whatever other reason. The SOPs are your anchor point at country level and give you the mandate to do this. And that circle says exactly operating as one. Okay, one last slide before I hand over to Luigi, who's going to talk a little bit more about the BOS itself. This is for you at country level, maybe of less of a relevance, but I consider it important that you understand where this sits. You got a thing called HLCM, that's a high-level committee on management. These guys have all kinds of networks underneath them. These are the top levels in the agencies that talk about harmonizing certain processes. If these guys don't harmonize it, you will not be able, you will face great challenges doing something. So these guys are saying, okay, in procurement, how do our policies and procedures, what do they look like? And how can we harmonize these so that they are the same or at least very similar, so that you guys at the country level can actually engage in procurement jointly. Same for ICT, same for HR, same for finance. Once these guys have harmonized that, it comes to us in the UNDG, because the UNDG focuses on supporting you, the countries. But I cannot send you a 500-page procurement manual. Well, technically I could, but you probably wouldn't be too happy. You can't really use that. So it's our job to transform that into strategies, common service packages, and different instruments and tools and services that you can actually directly take and use. And we are using the BOS to channel all these harmonized things in one package for you. So it is the framework in which we're actually trying to push forward these individual harmonized products, so that you don't have to worry and look at the HQs, what's been harmonized and what's not. We are channeling that through the BOS, and when we support you with the development of the BOS, we will highlight to you, listen, in these areas and these areas, it's easier, and these areas it's still challenging. It's very safe to say that procurement, ICT, logistics, and premises, so what we call facility services, those are the areas where we're most harmonized. Finance is a little bit challenging still, and HR is like coming up. But there's still a lot of work to go. But before I hand over to Luigi, I want to tell you that, listen, it is very important for those of you who are going through your first generation BOS. At this stage, there's so much low-hanging fruit, so many areas that allow for collaboration and that are fairly easy to set up, that's a very important focus area. And once you get that up and running and you got your first generation BOS up and running, then meanwhile HLCM will continue to harmonize more and more areas, and you can then include it in your second generation BOS. But for now, there is a massive range of low-hanging fruits. Some are more complicated, but big yields. Some of them are a little bit less complicated, could also be big yields, but easier to implement. So there's plenty to do in this area. And remember that this pitch is a condensed pitch. If your country goes for a BOS, we do these kind of introductions, but a little bit more slow and a little bit more broad with your OMTs and UNCTs. So you can just contact Luigi in this case, and we will schedule one of these sessions with either the UNCT or the OMT to introduce the concept and help you localize it to something that fits your country. So that all that takes is a mail to us here in DOCO. Now with that, let's look a little bit about how the BOS looks, and Luigi will kick that off.
Thank you, Lars. All right. So now that Lars has set the context of where does the BOS fit at headquarters and system level, let's take a look at what's happening at country level. This graph shows the most widely implemented common services at country level as per DESA's OMT survey. This was a survey that was circulated, or the report was circulated in January this year, so this is the most recent one. About 119 UNCTs responded to this survey, and as you can see on this slide, out of the 119, 99 UNCTs reported that they have common security services. After that, 86 UNCTs, travel services, etc., etc. Now, let's take a look at the next slide, which is basically the same graph, but now contrasted against red bars, which indicate the amount of UNCTs that actually went through the trouble and did a feasibility study for that particular service, common service. So, out of 99 UNCTs that went for common security services, only 17 did a cost-benefit analysis for this. I find this myself a little bit surprising, considering, for example, security services. These are usually contracts that involves hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, and there's only very little research done beforehand. I mean, if I go and buy a TV, I do my research. I determine the size that I want, the definition, the colors, connectivity with Wi-Fi and internet, that sort of thing. And I determine before I go to the store what my best value for money is. So why wouldn't you do this with large contracts? If I do this with my TV, why wouldn't you do this for security services? So the conclusion of this, basically, this slide is that there's very little analysis done system-wide, and this is exactly where the BOS can help you out. The BOS aims to address this issue by providing a framework for analysis, prioritization and management of common operations at country level. What exactly is the BOS? Basically, the BOS is a strategic framework with which you can plan out all common operations on the medium run. It follows the same results-based management principles as the UNDAF. The BOS ultimately culminates in a results matrix with strategic impact, outcome level indicators, output level indicators, and against which you measure your performance. In a way, it's an UNDAF, albeit a light version UNDAF for your operations. I have to make apologies. I'm apparently working with an older version. Here it says voluntary yet highly recommended. Please forget that. It's highly recommended. Very important to note, the BOS does not replace agency-specific operations. It's there to supplement it, to supplement joint operations. Also important to note is that the BOS looks to bring together program and operations. Lars will tell you more about this in the coming slides. But it looks at the programmatic requirements from the UNDAF. Last but not least, the BOS is a flexible planning tool, meaning that it can be adapted to your local needs and local capacities. Sorry, hold on. Let me briefly elaborate a little bit on the status, the global status. Roughly at present, 3 out of every 10 UNCTs have a BOS in place or are currently working on a BOS. Additionally, 4 UNCTs out of 10 have expressed an interest in BOS, so they're pretty much soon going to work on one. As basically a huge incline in demand for BOS. You wanted to take this one?
I'll do it now.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back.
Okay, guys. Sorry, here's a lesson learned. Never, ever, ever adjust the deck 15 minutes before you do a webinar, because it's like the order. That's why we're cycling a little bit through the slides. Made some changes to the sequencing, and better should not have done that. So sorry for the cycling through the slides. Taking over what Luigi means, like it is a voluntary framework, yet highly recommended. What we mean by that, ultimately the country decides whether they want to do a BOS. So what we're trying to do is we want to give the country team space to say, okay, listen, this adds value or not. Having said that, the SOPs themselves are being scaled very rapidly. And there's many different countries now who actually formally are DAO countries. And as you saw from the previous slide, I didn't do the exact math, but I think there's probably 83, 84 countries now either having a BOS or in the pipeline of the BOS. So that's what we mean by that message. But ultimately, it's of course the UNCT who's got the ultimate, who holds the ultimate decision. Now, as Luigi said, the BOS, I mean, to me, what it means is that it does 2 very simple things. It allows me to, or it allows us to prioritize certain services. We have usually no shortage of different things that would actually help, but that we would like to have. But on the other hand, we got a very limited capacity in many countries, especially MIC countries. And we also have very limited resources, like money to actually invest. And sometimes that's very small seed money to be able to invest. So the BOS, what it does, it allows you to look at your current services as well as your new future service that you would like to have. And it uses a CBA methodology, a fairly simple and straightforward one, to prioritize, okay, which ones are actually, given the investment in time of you, of the staff, as well as the investment in money, which ones actually have the highest payoff in terms of cost reductions or quality. That's what the BOS looks at. It defines the service in terms of, okay, does this reduce our cost? Or if it doesn't, or in addition to it, if it does, what does it do with our quality? Are we able to be faster, to be more agile, to be more responsive? So that's what it helps doing. Now it's linked to the UNDAF. I'll come to that in my next slides. It's the time frame is the same as the UNDAF, as Luigi already mentioned. So usually when you start your UNDAF, that's also when the BOS is started. We got a number of countries now that actually are in transitional BOSs, we call them. They said, okay, we're mid-cycle, we're still going to do a BOS, but since the UNDAF is already locked, we're going to do it. The direct links to the programs will be slightly weaker due to that. But they approach the BOS from a purely operational perspective with less dialogue towards the UNDAF. Some dialogue, but less strong as you can do it when you're developing your UNDAF, of course, because then you can still also adapt the UNDAF based on the input of the business operations side. So that link is quite important. It's one of the pieces that actually will break the silos, or is intended to break the silos. Now, under the BOS, you got 6 categories of services. And these are referred to as service lines. They're procurement, ICT, finance, logistics and transport, human resources, and facility services. Now, before the chat box fills up with people, can we change that? It's a question we almost every time get. Yes, you can. We do not recommend it because there's different reporting formats that we make available in terms of templates. So if you change one, you have to adapt all of that. Most of the services we are aware of, if not all, will fit either in either of these categories. It ultimately doesn't matter as long as it sits under your BOS somewhere. It's a label, right? So you have your BOS 3 to 5 years. The OMT has task teams working on each of the service lines, and the work plans are 1 year, but they're tied to your BOS. So you got a strategic link to your ultimate objectives in terms of cost avoid, lowering your costs or enhancing your quality in your work plans. So it ties in with the outcomes and the outputs of the BOS. And that's quite important because that moves us away from this project approach that we had in the old days. Is basically the OMT work plan is an annual work plan, sometimes pretty good, but it does not have any link to an objective beyond that 1 year that you're planning for. So that's what the structure of the BOS looks like. Now, to talk a little bit about this program operations link, we got a lot of questions on that. I already hinted on it in the starting point. I mean, if we deliver programs, another way to look at programs is that 80% of the programs are actual operations. It's a combination of recruiting technical assistance. It's a combination of procurement, ICT support. It's about field presences. It's about the staff, as I said. So the programs are part for a large degree actually determined by the operations. So in terms of designing the UNDAF strategy or the program strategy, it is quite remarkable that over time operations retreated to their corner, program retreated to their own corner, and there was never any dialogue. So program just says like this, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then after the fact, operations is like, okay guys, how can you support us with this? Now, what we're trying to do with the BOS is to front load that engagement. So before the strategies get locked in, that you actually have the dialogue between the program and the operations staff, like, okay, what are the targeted interventions in the program? And that ops staff actually can participate in that planning. And let me give you an example. I'm basing this on Papua New Guinea. We at the time, we wanted to scale to 4 or 5 additional provinces with a health intervention. I think it was either HIV and AIDS or malaria or something. So the program staff was basically designing their UNDAF, and they said like, listen, okay, we're going to go to 5 additional provinces, and we're going to do that in the first year of the UNDAF. We scale the presences up, and then we're going to expand our service provision to the communities, which by and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. That was a good thing because we needed that. Now they actually sat down just before they locked in the UNDAF, and that was ad hoc. At the time there was no BOS. With the operations staff, and operations was saying like, listen, which provinces are you actually even targeting? And it turned out that 4 out of the 5 provinces did not have any presence of the UN at that point. And now Papua New Guinea is also a special country, like we have so many in the UN, that this is not easy access. There's major security concerns, there's many other concerns. And either way, for the operations to set up a field presence, an office, the logistics, the ICT, the security, and for us to recruit the program staff that actually need to start delivering the program, as well as linking it up, of course, with the government, that was a very tall order. So through their discussions, they basically not downscaled, they kept the 5, but they spread it out over the life cycle of the UNDAF, because the operations staff was saying, like, listen, we can probably scale 2 offices a year, and that's if we really focus hard on this particular program, because the health program is not the only one either. It's all competing priorities. But you want to have that discussion early on before the program staff locks in that program. So by doing it that way, you're actually reinforcing the quality and your ability to deliver your program by engaging the operations staff. And again, I cannot say this more enough. This should have been done from the start. And I know some countries are already standardly doing it, but I also know that most of us are not. So in a way, the program is the client. The operations supplies the different services required by the client to deliver the program. And this nomenclatura, this labeling is very important, because the BOS shapes the results framework in terms of that relation. That's why we're looking at cost avoidance, or we're looking at quality, because as a client, the program will need to be able to indicate, like, listen, I got a certain budget, this cost component is either too high, can we look at that, how we can bring that down? Or on the other hand, like, guys, I'm sitting in Libya, I'm sitting in, I don't know, in Syria, whatsoever, I need speed. And the way we're doing things now is just not fast enough. My procurement is going too slow, I can't recruit fast enough. So these are all different things that a client, the program has, and that the operations as a supplier can, and to the degree possible, should deliver. Now the BOS, in terms of the indicators, measures that. It's much more client-driven. And that's not to be critical to the operations staff. On the contrary, this is a positive thing, because it allows us as operations to much more target and focus our interventions and focus on those areas where it really matters in terms of program delivery. So that's why the BOS casts this as a client-supplier relationship. Now the key engagement points for the UNDAF and the BOS, there are 4, although there are different countries do it different ways, but in general the BOS guidance, which by the way, the new 2016 guidance will be coming out at the end of next month, I think. It's going to the UNDG this week for approval. Once it gets approved, we'll announce it in a big way. But in that guidance, you'll see this coming back. There's 4 engagement points. One of them is at the stage of the roadmap. So when you draft your plan for the UNDAF, the design of the UNDAF, you also reference there the roadmap for the BOS, because the BOS also has a roadmap. I'll show you that in a moment. So both roadmaps actually reference each other. Now, although, as Luigi said, the BOS is a type of UNDAF, but I want to stress that UNDAF is a 2-year process with a lot of external stakeholders. You're negotiating with government, you're negotiating with civil society. The BOS doesn't have that. The BOS, in a way, in that sense, is a quicker process, but try to keep that link with the UNDAF process, because there's a couple of key points where you do want to talk to program staff before you lock in your BOS, and vice versa. And that second engagement moment of key importance is the strategic prioritization. Strategic prioritization is at the stage where you got your draft results frameworks for the UNDAF ready. And there's a twist here. If you got an outcome level only UNDAF, this is going to be hard, because the outcome level is like a reduction of HIV and AIDS by 2020 in 5 provinces. That doesn't give you the detail that you need. Okay, what are the operational implications? It is much easier to do with an output level UNDAF, which anyway, I'm a bit of a purist in that sense. I like the output level UNDAFs because the outputs are much more concrete. It'll tell you, for example, exactly which provinces are you targeting, which are your target audiences, what communities, and what type of intervention is actually happening. But at that point, when it's still draft, you want to pull together the programs and the operations staff. And usually it takes the format of I don't know, we've seen it in 3-day retreats, 1-day retreats. Some people do it in a meeting. I think that's kind of short. But at that stage, you're going to look at, okay, what is the UNDAF planning? Now, having done, I think, 6 or 7 UNDAFs myself, do not put your people through a whole UNDAF. Do not sit down with the operations staff and let's all together go over the 60 or 120 outputs that we have. That will kill your audience and definitely will kill the buy-in. What you're aiming for are the changes, the deltas, the spikes. You're looking at your bigger programs. You're looking at new programs. The example I gave you is an example of scaling, but another one, for example, is elections. For some of you who still are using mainly joint programs, you're looking at the larger joint programs. So you're looking at the anomalies, if you wish. And that is what you discuss during this one or 2 or 3 days. The program staff presents their ambitions, their plans, and the operations staff basically asks questions. Okay, like, listen, how many of these staff do you already have on board? Where is this taking place? Do we have sub-officers there already? What is the cycle time we need for procurement? Is this a particularly challenging province where we need to be fast? Are there special needs that you program people have for us to deliver this? That kind of discussion you're going to have at that second step. So, and that both can lead to an adaptation of the BOS as well as the UNDAF. This is where you're still flexible, and this is where you manage expectations on both sides. Now, the third step is the annual monitoring. The annual monitoring often takes the format of an annual report, which you do anyway as program staff or OMT staff to the UNCT. Often in this annual monitoring, the way I would normally run it is like, listen, I look at the yellows and the reds. I'm not that interested in the greens. They seem to be going fine. And what I focus on for this monitoring piece is, okay, what is the nature? Why is this yellow or red? Are there operational constraints that are causing this thing to be yellow or red? I've had many examples where recruitment caused a program to go yellow. Now, that kind of discussions is something you want to pick up in the annual monitoring piece. Now, don't forget the BOS about common operations. There's still the agency operations. If the bottleneck sits with an agency, there's very little we can do through the BOS. But if it is through elements that we actually have joint services for, then that's something you want to pick up in the next year's BOS annual work plan. For example, recruitment can be sped up by pre-qualifying consultants, pre-qualifying certain types of recruitment. There are many databases being developed for that. What that effectively does, it cuts off part of your process because you've pre-qualified people, which means you're faster. The quality increases. Same goes for procurement. If it's too slow, setting up LTAs and that kind of thing can speed up a certain procurement process. Now, last, evaluation. It's the same logic as the annual monitoring. When the UNDAF goes through the evaluation, the BOS goes through its evaluation. Now, the BOS will have its own set of evaluation challenges and opportunities. But on the same hand, in the same way, you're interested within the UNDAF. If the UNDAF failed to deliver in certain ways, you want to know why as operations people. And you want to know why in particular, where this is due to operational support not being optimized. And why? Because that evaluation in your next cycle will of course be the basis for your next cycle BOS. So it will pick up, it can pick up these things if you feel like at your country level you can address this jointly. So those are the 4 key engagement points. Now, let me get a sip of coffee. It's 9 a.m. here, so we do need our caffeine. Why the BOS? I mean, I've covered most of these. This is something you want to pitch to a UNCT. It's the enhanced linkages between the program and the operations. We covered that already. I'm not going to go into that again. It's the lower operational cost. We call that avoided cost. Now, how do you lower your cost? It's mainly a reduction, for example, duplication of work processes. Let me give you a very simple example. If you got an LTA, which is the easiest, straightforward, kicking in an open door type of example. If you set up an LTA, not only do you avoid your repetition of every time going to market to buy certain things, which takes a certain amount of time, it's also, if it's a joint LTA, instead of 14 agencies going through the same LTA process for the same commodity, being it office supplies or fuel, or you name it, it's one time you go through that. And I'll tell you this, if you do, and that's part of the BOS, it has it as an example, if you do the costing of what it costs to set up an LTA, it's quite significant, it's quite a process. So you can imagine the avoided cost of, instead of everybody doing a separate LTA or doing it once jointly, the cost reductions are massive and the pressure on your time is massive. But that's not the end of it, that's just the LTA establishment. Then every time when you buy, you're actually avoiding a certain cost, or you're avoiding certain labor. You're avoiding pressure on your work time that can be spent somewhere else. So those are examples of reduction of operational cost. In procurement, you also have the discounts you can negotiate due to joint volumes and different things. Same goes for ICT help desk. Rather than everybody having an ICT analyst running around to provide level 1 support, it is much more cost effective to actually have consolidated that in a desk where you actually cost share a certain number of ICT analysts, which usually tends to be lower than the ones you had before. Now the quality, and this is, I'm big on this one. I mean, I come from private sector originally. I'm just stunned that if certain services are being provided, like in Brazil or in Vietnam, or under a bilateral service contract, like for example UNDP or UNICEF or WFP provide services to clients, the other agencies, there should be KPIs in that to actually measure the quality of that service. And if that is not being met, that is the basis for an engagement. These people are paying for a certain service. Now the BOS applies that same principle. You're setting KPIs in terms of quality, response times for ICT. You're talking about procurement cycle times. So you're having much more of a quality drive behind your services. Now don't go overboard in it. I've seen countries actually defining 60, 70, 80 indicators. That is not the point. You want 2 or 3 good ones. The goal is not to set up an M&E framework. The goal is to identify the main things that you consider important when it comes to this particular service and measure those. That's what you want to report to your UNCT. You want to tell them, this year we established 7 LTAs. Each LTA is used X amount of times, which means that we've cut off X amount of times this part of the process that we had to go to the market. And that's very easily converted into a dollar value. It's not an accounting tool. Honestly, I don't care whether it's 80,000 gained or avoided or 60,000 avoided. It's a lot of money that's avoided. So it can be done with a rough brush. The last 2 are enhanced ability to track and report. I like, but that's me. I'm very much aware that not everybody is the same. I like that I have an overview at any given moment. That as a DRR or as an RC, I can see what we're actually focusing on. I know what the investment values are, and I know what I'm driving for. Why are we doing this? Rather than having these little individual projects flying all over the place. I mean, as in my OMTs, we started projects and then we spent like 6 months or 5 months setting up, trying to do joint fleet management. A new rep comes in and says, "Oh no, that's not a good idea," and then the OMT was told, "Okay, stop it." 5 months down the drain. And that's a lack of this consistency that through the BOS you will get, because the UNCTs are signing off, the OMTs have a very clear focus, which can be tracked and reported upon. The same goes for management control. There's data, there's information. Again, don't go overboard with that. With every information piece you add, there's a price associated with that for collecting it. So you need to balance it out, and we're here to help you with that. But man, is it nice to have a discussion based on facts rather than gut feel, because we all went to the airport and we saw so many UN cars. Let's reduce the number of UN cars without thinking through, okay, how is that going to work in terms of fleet management, and does it actually save us money? Anyway, as you can see, I'm quite passionate about that. I'm already getting signs here that I'm...
Breathe, Lars, breathe.
And I'm behind schedule. I'm eating into Eve's time. I'm sure he'll forgive me. Okay, so this is enough talk about roughly what is the BOS. So concretely, what does it mean? How do we do a BOS? Usually what it does is a 1 hour kickoff. That's usually Luigi or myself or your regional UNDG colleagues, in particular in Latin America and Africa. We do an introduction with you, which is this very presentation. We go a little bit slower. We might focus it a little bit more if you say, okay, focus on this, de-emphasize that, that's all fine. So for 1 hour, we talk to your OMT and UNCT, and we do a Q&A. We do a prep session with you or with the RCOs just before that meeting if we need to. But we create the awareness. What is this about and what is this not about? We also talk there about like how can we adapt the approach so that it matches your capacity. MICs are not LICs. Low capacity countries are not the same as a high capacity country, so there's some adaptation needed. It is not rocket science, seriously, but we help you do this, okay? So then you go to you can do a training. UNDG organizes 3 trainings, usually English, French, and Spanish. We have several of our lead trainers also online, I think. Those we announced through CPN and through our BOS network. We got a ginormous email list of 700 people that are associated with the BOS in one way or another. So we do have these global trainings, but a lot of countries do their own trainings as well, and we can allocate people for your training. If you say, the country that I'm going to soon is Swaziland, they wanted to have that training, they got somebody from the roster to come from the next door country. So nice, low cost, and they do their own training. You have a roadmap where you plan out your BOS process. This is 2 or 3 pages, people, not 20, 25. Luigi sent me a mail this morning with a 27-page roadmap. And I applaud their enthusiasm. We love that, but that's really not necessary. That means save you energy for where the real thing starts. Roadmap is 2 or 3 pages. It outlines what is your background of your country, why do you need a BOS, and what is your timeline. So what is your plan? Think Microsoft project, you know, that kind of thing. 2 or 3 pages. There's examples on the website of everything that is on this slide. The baseline analysis that is in the future is going to be rephrased as stock take in a new guidance, but it comes down to a similar thing, is what kind of services do we at this moment have? I mean, what's the mapping of the current common services and how are they performing? And we want you to think about that, because whatever you got already is going to absorb part of your capacity. And OMTs are not known to have unlimited capacity. On the contrary. So if you know what you're already running and what you already need to invest in to keep it running, that will also help you define a realistic additional set of services that you might want to set up. So it's important in that sense. The needs analysis looks at these new services. It looks forward. We turn into a conflict country. What does that mean? It will definitely change the way you're doing your business. So what does it have that? What kind of services would we need in terms of operations? We got big projects new coming up. It's a little bit that UNDAF program link that I talked about. Fiji wanted video conferencing because they had 10 different islands they need to cover. This goes for other countries as well, where the cost of travel is high, for example in Brazil. But why you cannot fly your program people, and yet you need that link of your program staff to the hub, to the headquarters, so they can participate in weekly meetings, so they can participate in program meetings, or in operations meetings for that matter. So they set up a video conferencing system over the islands to reduce their travel cost and to enhance morale and quality of program, so these people in remote locations can operate as a normal part of a normal team. So that's an example of another new service. Then the CBA, this is the beating heart of the BOS. And we'll hear from, I think it's Joanne from Moldova? Well, we'll hear from Moldova and we'll hear from Brazil. The CBA is where you take the new services only and you basically look, okay, what kind of investment do we need? In terms of money and in terms of labor cost, people. direct cost and indirect cost. So what are the investments we need and what is the projected gain we get from that? And it does that for every service that you want to do in addition to what you already have. And it then categorizes them based on that impact. So it's a very much an impact-driven prioritization. It's incredibly powerful. There's different ways of doing it. I'll touch upon them. I can't go into the details. But the CBAs, the beating heart here, is where you determine the scope of your ultimate scope of your BOS. Then you got some kind of retreat. Okay, we got this as existing services. We got these new services. These new services, this is the CBA analysis. So these are the ones that are most highest impact that we want. And in the retreat, usually the UNCT participates as well as the OMT, and you lock in your individual services, your strategic areas. That leads to a results framework, as Luigi said. That's fairly straightforward, outcome output with some indicators, and that's your 5-year results framework. Your annual work plan derives from that framework. And then you have your BOS. So that's pretty much it. It's our previous estimates stood at 4 months. We currently have it at 6 months. That's an average. I mean, guys, if you got a big BOS like the Ethiopia, you're going to have more. If you're a conflict country, it's also a little bit more complicated. If you're an MIC with a very focused and limited scope BOS, you're going to have less. That's not 6 months full-time work. That is 6 months cycle time. Like sometimes you need to wait for another agency to provide some data and whatever. So that's what the 6 months is about. Okay, I got one more slide and then I think we go back to Luigi. There's 2 BOS approaches. And yesterday I had an exchange with Moldova, with Johan. They had a thing called a light BOS. And I don't like the term light BOS at all. Because what happens, the moment you say light BOS, everybody says, great, that's what we're going to do. We like light. And I do not blame the countries. I mean, again, soon I'll be at the country level. I might have a different view on that. But listen, the BOS is not a thing that you pick and choose. You cannot say, like, listen, oh, I'm going to do a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and then I skip the results frameworks and I call that a BOS. That's not going to work. I mean, it's a waste of your time, equally important as a waste of our time. That's not the way to do this. I mean, the steps that I just presented are the mandatory steps under a BOS. However, there's different ways of doing it. I mean, one way, and Luigi captured this very good in this new slide, there's an estimated way and an exact way. I mean, Rwanda is an example of the exact way. What they did is for procurement, they go into the systems. They look at the average prices. They look at the number of POs that were used in a certain commodity group. And they use that to do the cost-benefit analysis. And that's absolutely is the best approach. It has just one minor detail. It takes way more time and it takes way more of your capacity. So that will work for country teams where you have stronger capacity, where you have strong buy-in, and where you have a need to be very accurate. You need, for whatever reason, you need to have your data and your focus and your volumes very accurate. For example, Brazil, they said they were setting up an integrated service center, an integrated back office. So it's very key that you analyze your volumes, etc., accurately, because that is tied to the amount of staff you need. It is important if you set up an ICT help desk, because you need to know a little bit, okay, how many help desk tickets are you raising? What is the demand for this service? Do I need 1 analyst? Do I need 1.2 analysts? Or do I need 2? It's very important. So in that area, you need to be exact. You pull your data from the ERP systems and you get a very accurate BOS at the cost of it being a more intense process. The opposite is the estimated approach, which does not do that. The estimated approach does not go into the ERPs. There's basically the OMT sitting there and estimating what they think their volumes are. They're estimating what they think the benefits would be. So the advantage of that is that it's way faster. It's more based on meetings and such rather than analysis. The downside to that is it's much less accurate because you're working on estimates, and the estimates will only be as good as the quality of the people you got there and their knowledge of the processes. The good thing is the UNDG has been training consultants, which was a little bit controversial because normally we don't train external people, but we did it anyway. So we now have 10 consultants trained in the BOS methodology who have to pass quite rigorous quality assurance things. So for those of you who want to go exact but don't have the capacity, these consultants are available and are well trained. So the thing we don't want you is to get a consultant who delivers bad work. So these guys at least are trained, they know what they're doing. So these are available for those of you who want to go exact. Okay, this slide I'm going to skip. I said it already. It's the BOS scales to your local capacity and needs. We have BOSes with one area, only procurement or only HR or only ICT for tiny countries who only have an OMT of 5 people. And many times these are G staff, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some of the best people I know are G staff. But it's very hard to get the bigger projects off the ground with 4 people. So you can make it as, you can take any area you like, as many things under that as you like. You can only do it for your existing portfolio, or you can also include the new portfolio. So it scales to your needs. And it's opt-in, opt-out. We put this in because some of the agencies, in particular the specialized agencies, say like, yeah, listen, but I don't want all these services. That's fine. The BOS is a letter of intent. It has no legal value in that sense, but it's signed by the reps. They buy into the concept. The agencies can opt in or opt out of the services in the BOS. That has always been the case. Nobody is forced to take all the services. You take the service that for your agency makes sense. Okay, I seriously need to drink something. Yeah. Oh, I need to do one more. Okay, so this is all fine. So we know what the BOS is, where it fits. We know how to do this stuff. So what's the impact? Now, this slide is easily the most controversial slide in the UNDG in the last year. We did an independent evaluation, so not by ourselves or agencies, but independent people came in and evaluated 5 BOS pilots. Now, what you see on this slide, I cannot stress this enough. This will not necessarily all apply to your countries. This was 5 countries in a very particular setting: Ethiopia, Malawi, Rwanda, Tanzania. I apologize to the 5th country that I'm not mentioning now because it doesn't come to mind, but 5 countries. And it depends on the maturity of your market. It depends on the capacity in your country. But we want to give you a flavor, or at least drive home the message that I take away from this slide. There is a positive return on investment. This particular independent evaluation is on the website. It's concluded that for every $1 invested, being it labor time or direct investment, the return on the common operations under the BOS was 4.67. In my eyes, it's slightly high. My experience, that's wow. Those are cool countries. The thing is also, when you go into your first generation BOS, your returns are quite high because you're starting. It depends also how many common services you have in place already. In procurement, the $25 sounds really high, but they did quite an analysis. The data is not perfect, so I think again this is quite high. But hey, cut this in half. Cut this in a quarter. The point still stands. It has a positive return on investment, so it's worth our time. And that is the key message of this slide. Again, do not go to your university now quoting these numbers, and if you do, make it very clear this was for these 5 countries. It's very different than MICs or other countries. But it is an example of impact, and that is a good thing. And very soon we'll have other impact data from the other BOSes that are now online. Okay, I think we got 3 or 4 more slides, and that's for Luigi.
I'll go through it very quickly. Apart from cost avoidance and improving quality, the BOS also aims to achieve gains and benefits that cannot be measured and expressed in numbers. I'll just give you the top 4. First of all, you have a better prioritization of resources. Secondly, you have a more consistent and standardized approach to common operations. Thirdly, you have a better tool for strategic planning out your operations. And fourthly, you have a better integration with programmatic requirements. Challenges that we see so far, as perceived by OMTs, the top 3 are lack of funding, doing the actual feasibility studies, and lack of agency commitment. It is helpful to make UNCTs and OMTs aware of these challenges and plan ahead for them so that ensuing risk can be anticipated and managed accordingly. Lars mentioned there's UNDG support for BOS. You're not alone in doing this. There's the roster of business operations experts. The roadmap that Lars previously mentioned puts UNDG in a position to allocate you with a resource from this roster. This person is dedicated from you from start to finish. This person works pro bono. They've committed themselves after the training and after the BOS certification to avail themselves and help out other countries. Sometimes these people are asked to field missions. Please be mindful that such missions need to be cost shared by by your UNCT. Other than the roster resource, there's the team here at DOCO, which is Lars and myself, and Lars's replacement sometime soon. Please keep us in the loop. As the global coordinators, we can always jump in where necessary. Meanwhile, we've also set up a peer-to-peer network. Lars just mentioned our email list of 700 people plus that have one way or another ties with business operations and or the BOS. So we have quite a vast network of operations practitioners. So if you have a problem or issue or maybe just a comment or experience you want to share, we can always connect you with the right people and bounce off ideas and if you're looking for solutions. Lars also mentioned that there are certified, BOS certified consultants, about 10 to 12. I can add to that these people are usually ex-UN staff, so they know how the system works and they know their things very well. Lars also mentioned the trainings. We have 3 regional trainings a year, the French, the Spanish, and the English. Other than that, we're also setting up regional and sub-regional trainings in collaboration with the regional UNDG and local country teams. What comes to mind is that I think Egypt at the moment is interested in setting up a training that would be open to surrounding countries. I know there's a bunch of trainings being discussed in Latin America. You're always welcome to join. The basic setup is that we try to open this up to other countries as well and share the cost that way. Last but not least, we have alternative funding mechanisms. There's the UNDAF Innovation Facility. Lars can tell you more about this. I think over the past 1 or 2 years, we've made available 1.9 million in total. Basically, we're looking for, when it comes to business operations, for innovative solutions, and we asked country teams to come up with a proposal. These proposals are then being evaluated, and on the basis of this evaluation, we were able to grant somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 grand to each project. Other than that, there's the matching fund, which is also an alternative funding mechanism being discussed or has been approved. Not yet. There would be a way of sort of upfronting the money to a country team, and then by cost savings, you would be able to pay this back. So it would be a revolving fund in a way. Next slide. Unlocking this UNDG support. Basically, URC submits the roadmap once endorsed by the UNCT to our dearly beloved director here at DOCO, Ms. Kaniwik Naraja. Basically, you're not asking for permission, but you're just informing the UNDG that you as a UNCT has decided to move forward on the BOS. This email should be CC'd to the 2 co-chairs of the UNDG Business Operations Working Group. That's Jens Wendel and Jean-Yves Rousseau. Jens, we saw his video at the beginning of this webinar. And please also keep Lars and myself in the loop as the global coordinators for BOS. Other than that, we have a gamut of tools and templates and guidance and manuals on our website. The URL is given here. And with this, we've come to the end of the presentation. Yes?
I just want to add, my apologies to Lesotho. They were the 5th country of the evaluation. So Christy and Sal and Irakli, Lesotho was the fifth one in the BOS evaluation. Also, if you want to hear about countries doing this rather than us talking about it, good examples are Tanzania, Rwanda, Malawi, Ethiopia, Lesotho, Brazil, Moldova, several of the ECAS countries. There's a number of countries that have solid experience with this. So sometimes it's better to hear it from the horse's mouth. So drop us a mail. We'll tell you which countries for your region you should contact if you want to hear it for them. With that, I think we're switching to
Q&A? Oh, sorry.
No, Moldova.
Okay.
Guys,
Moldova, can you hear us?
Yes.
Very good. Can we kick off?
Shall I switch to your screen?
Yeah, that'd be nice. Oh, not our screen, but do you have a presentation?
Johan, you have the floor.
Okay, let's see. Can you see our screen? Can you see our presentation?
Yes.
No, not yet. No.
Yes, we can see your screen. There we go.
Very good. Okay, let's go. Good afternoon from Moldova. This afternoon here. My name is Johan. I'm sitting here together with my colleagues Ira and Galina from operations. And I'll start by giving you a brief background and talk about the rationale behind our BOS. And then Galina and Ira will continue going into more details about our recent revision of the BOS, some lessons learned, and some more technical details about the process. So we developed our first BOS concurrently with our current UNDAF, which runs from 2013 till 2017. And the UNCT already had quite a good track record of joint operations, and we decided we wanted to take this a step forward and do a BOS. And by doing that, we really wanted to realize the full potential of joint operations for increased effectiveness and efficiency, for cost reductions, avoidance, savings in staff time, and also really to increase the quality and timeliness of procurement and so forth. And moreover, we wanted to move from this more of an ad hoc approach to joint operations and to add a more strategic and long-term perspective. Because we realized that a BOS is actually a very good management instrument. It helps us to measure how good we are in joint operations and allows us to make mid-course adjustments so that we can get even better. Just to mention also, that it's important to have development effectiveness in perspective when you look at this, because at the end of the day, what we do in terms of operations should support our program delivery, and that's an aspect that we always try to keep in mind. And it's also related to meeting expectations of our partners, expectations of the government, donors, and other partners. And we've seen that it's really powerful that you can show to the partners that we are doing our best to be as effective and efficient as possible when it comes to joint operations, because numbers are very important to show them. And there is a delivering as one aspect to this also. We are delivering as one country, self-starter, and we're currently implementing 13 out of 15 of the core delivering as one elements, fully or partially. And we wanted to move forward here and push delivering one step further by developing and implementing a BOS. Lars mentioned the estimated approach. Basically, the UN presence in a low middle income country such as Moldova is quite small, so many of the agencies in the UNCT don't really have any dedicated operations staff. So we didn't have the capacity at the time to do a full-fledged cost-benefit analysis. It's quite labor-intensive, so that was rather challenging. However, we're in the process now of developing our new UNDAF, which will be for the time period 2018 till 2022. So we'll develop a second generation BOS with that, and then our intention is really to do a full-fledged cost-benefit analysis to guide the BOS. And now I'll hand over to Ira.
Okay. Well, tell a few words about the process because we had our BOS already since 2013, but last year we revised it quite significantly using this estimated approach. And during the process, it was very important and helpful to have, first of all, as leader of the head of OMT, an international head of agency. In this way, being UNCT member, the issue of revision of BOS was part of the UNCT discussion, and the progress was periodically reported there. This also ensured the active participation from other agencies in the revision of BOS. We also have our RC office very supportive in coordinating agencies' participation and connecting to UNDG, while the updated guides and especially the monitoring and evaluation guide produced by UNDG was very instrumental when we were revising BOS. We organized dedicated sessions. It is mentioned about retreat, but it was not 3 days retreat. It was like half-day meeting with own team members and also operation staff from largest agencies, so that we divided in subgroups working on each existing outcome of our BOS. In order to revise the outcomes, how they are formulated, to revise indicators so they are measurable and more realistic to be monitored, and to do this estimation of potential cost avoidance or estimation of any other achievements that we would have while implementing BOS. To mention that because our BOS was developed several years ago, of course it is not formulated according to the current monitoring and evaluation guide and other guidances. This is why we adjusted what was adjustable at this point in time, so that we have at least several most important outcomes with measurable indicators following the DOCA guidance. What is also important to mention is that our BOS, we revised it through the perspective of diversity aspects. This was also help thanks to support from UNDG, because we got funding for an innovation project, and part of these activities was to revise BOS from this perspective. So we introduced the several outcomes which aim to mainstream accessibility, diversity, gender issues into different operational activities. Maybe to mention that it was indeed a very interesting process, and we learned during it, and now we are much more prepared to work on the new BOS in the process of UNDAF elaboration. And I'll ask Galina to follow with some challenges and lessons learned that we had after this process.
Okay, as Irina mentioned, the process of adjusting the BOS for Moldova was quite participatory and intensive. We've had almost all agencies participating with contributions on defining the outcomes, the outputs, with aligning our revised results framework to the UNDG guidelines, monitoring and evaluation framework. At the same time, we faced several challenges, like and still, we noticed that operations staff is still lagging behind with knowledge on RBM and monitoring and evaluation indicators. And this way clearly identified and realized when we tried to define specific indicators, measurable smart indicators per each outcome and output. At the same time, the tasks between the OMT members were not quite even, and involvement was not the same from everyone. Just when you do the BOS, you should understand that you have to dedicate time, you have to either push or either just forget about other activities you have to deal with, and be fully involved in BOS development and preparation. Just another challenge we faced and was pointed out by Lars in his presentation is lack of funding. And maybe that is why Moldova did not approach or did not do the cost-benefit analysis from the very beginning, neither in this revised BOS, simply because it is time, in addition to being time-consuming, it requires additional funding, which we considered that at this period of time we do not have. That's why we left it for the next BOS when we have the next UNDAC developed for the country, and we do together the BOS and the UNDAC as a single process and a single document. That's pretty major challenges that we faced, and in terms of lessons learned that we'd like just to mention here, and which are very, very important for everyone, is that we have very strong support from UNCT. And as Ira mentioned, not only UNCT who supported us, but international head of OMT also was key in promoting and ensuring the work is done. In addition to UNCT and international OMT leader, we have at the country level an active and a dedicated OMT. We've got timely support and guidance from UNDOCO team. We've learned that additional focus on priority service areas is key, and not only defining the service lines, but also the key indicators. Because later on, once we have these service lines, priority service lines and key indicators, it would be easier for us to report, to monitor, and to provide the support that is expected from us by UNCT. And of course, what we've learned that to do a BOS, we need additional time and additional expertise to do full cost-benefit analysis. That's very, very brief about Moldova experience. And we can also say that we very much hope that next BOS, which is to be for 2018-2022, will be more focused on what are our priority areas, on what should be the indicators, most important ones, and Moldova BOS will be an example to follow by other countries.
Just some final words also, lessons learned is that we can really use the BOS process to activate and empower the OMT and to improve the link between the OMT and UNCT and to get more focus on joint operations from the UNCT. We realized that we had to change a little bit the way the OMT works, because as I said, it's very labor intensive, the whole process. So we took this opportunity also to revise the TOR of the OMT and make sure that staff from agencies who participate in the work of the OMT are also rewarded for that from their agencies, which was a good lesson learned for us. So that's everything from our side right now. Over to you, Lars.
Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, we have one more speaker from Brazil, Yves Sassenrath, which is also one of our key lead trainers on the BOS. So he knows both Brazil as well as the BOS process in general. He has supported many, many countries with their BOS. And then we go into the Q&A. So about 10 minutes for Yves, and then we're running a little bit over time for the Q&A. So Yves, over to you. We'll bring up your screen.
Okay, can you hear me well?
We hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, colleagues around the world, I am very pleased to be here with you now and share some of the experiences that we have here in Brazil, setting up a single service window, which is a pilot right now. It's not something that is done in many countries, and I want to talk to you a little bit about our experience here and how we arrived at this what we call joint operating facility. The main idea behind this, as Lars and Luigi explained in the main BOS presentation, is basically how to arrive at common business operations that respond adequately to the programmatic needs of all the agencies that operate on a common platform, which is the UNDAF on the one side, but even beyond the UNDAF, how can we be more efficient and more nimble in our operations in a high middle income country like Brazil, and perhaps use that experience to replicate across the globe in high middle income countries or middle income countries where we see that the operational footprint of the UN needs to be more efficient, as is expressively said in the QCPR, and we need to be able to focus more on upstream policy advice, on advocacy, and on our programs. This has different meanings for different sizes of agencies, obviously, but the process in Brazil was slightly different from the textbook traditional approach that we recommend countries to do. Usually the premise is that we want to depart from the usual way of doing business in business operations on usually doing our planning based on anecdotes, on estimates, or based on our experience as long-serving operations staff, and quite disconnected from the program. And doing a business operations strategy through a series of analytical steps arrive at a coherent results framework that is based on a results-based management platform with indicators that are measurable and that are linked to the development results. When you do this business operations strategy analysis, you will then arrive at various scenarios depending on your services, on whether a service is fine as it is on the current common solution through LTAs or lead agency or whatever, or whether it should be maybe outsourced, or whether other solutions are appropriate, like a single service window, like a service desk that does it for all the participating agencies. Now, usually at the end of such an analysis, you would then say, this is what my solution will be. In Brazil, it was a little bit different. In Brazil, the senior management of various agencies approached the UNDG saying, we need to change our business model. We want to go towards a single service window, and we want to use the business operations strategy analysis to justify and to actually create this single service window. And as you see in this slide, basically, the drivers that were guiding the process on what we wanted to achieve here in Brazil was basically, as it says, the single rule set for clients, simplification, transparency, etc. You see it on the slide, reducing the costs, less duplication, having an independent, fair prioritization, which basically is one of the lessons learned when we talk about lead agency. Often you have complaints that when you have a lead agency, that those agencies that are reserving the service from that agency are always back in line. So that was a very strong feeling here in Brazil that pushed us to looking at a single service window that is sort of independent, where all the participating agencies have one voice and are stakeholders rather than service recipients. So obviously the consolidation of non-operations outside the joint operating facility and supplementing what we call the vertical versus the horizontal business solutions that many agencies are now doing. You heard it when Jens was talking. Many agencies have now created global service centers in Malaysia, UNICEF, in KL, UNDP, etc., etc. And as we see it, and as we see it also on the ground, is that there is a huge complementarity between those vertical service centers versus or together with these horizontal service centers on the ground. So one thing doesn't exclude the other. How did we do it? And I think that's a little bit the onus of the discussion that we have today with you guys. Is basically whether there is an either or, whether it is to do an exact analysis or to do it on estimates. Now, I don't think, and I think that's also what Lars is saying, there is no either or. It depends on the service that you're analyzing. It's very difficult to do an estimate on specific services where you need to have the data. I personally think this whole debate between exact or estimates, it's actually, this dichotomy defeats the purpose of the whole debate. We want operations to be more exact. We want operations to take part in the data revolution, to make use of it. And we want operations to have a credible voice on the table with empirical evidence and arguments when we talk to our leaders, talk to our program colleagues, where we have evidence that the way we're doing business maybe right now is not the most efficient way to do it. And often and mainly those arguments come from hard facts. When you've done your homework, you've done your analysis, and you can actually show that you can reduce costs, or you can avoid costs, and you can increase quality of service. Now, what we did in Brazil is we obviously followed the analytical path. We looked at the baseline in every agency. We knew pretty much what kind of services we wanted to have on this single service window. So we did the baseline analysis, then we did the needs analysis in terms of what the agencies needed in terms of the volume that they were managing individually. And then we did the cost-benefit analysis, which I just exemplify here in this table, where you see the acronym FTE is the equivalent of the full-time equivalent of a staff that works on a specific process. So if you see here 10 full-time equivalent, that basically means 10 staff working in procurement, etc., etc. So what was done in a quite a detailed exercise by each agency, coordinated by the OMT, was looking at each of those main service lines, procurement, ICT, HR, and travel, looking at the business flows, looking at the different processes that each agency is doing, how many staff, how much time, how many transactions, how much volume, etc., etc., is being done across the agencies that were participating. At the time, there were around 6, 7, and those are now also part of the joint operating facility group. And you see here that basically, based on this more factual, exact analytics, that was the only way for us to arrive at clear evidence that we can have quite significant cost savings if we reduce the full-time equivalent across agencies and concentrate them and get much more value for our money across the agencies by doing these services. Now, again, I don't think it is an either or. It depends on the services, where some services can be based on more estimates. It's a hybrid process that really comes out of this and is adapted to the reality of your country. So what's the result of this? The result of this right now is we have some 7 agencies that are actively participating, and we have some agencies that are considering jumping on the platform, using the services, perhaps not as core members, but more on a pay-as-you-go based on services model. The core members are, as you see here, the agencies listed, and the areas that the joint operating facility has started with are procurement, ICT, and travel right now. How did we get there? The main steps really was for us, obviously, setting this whole thing up is obviously much easier said than done. Confirming the staffing, which is basically how much money the agencies that participate need to put up front to guarantee the staffing structure. You need to obviously set up a transition phase where you phase out individual agency operations, and you phase in the service desk, which is incredibly important that there is no service disruption, because it's easy when you say these things, it sounds great, but when you roll these things out, obviously our service needs to continue, programs are continuing to be implemented, so that was a very important thing. Accountability framework, extremely important. The MOU, you can probably imagine 6 agency headquarters agreeing on an MOU for the first time to build such a single service window that is distinctive from other windows in the world, in that it is proposing the innovation of using joint manuals, where the idea is that the joint facility uses one manual for procurement that is harmonized between the 6 agencies that participate, which basically has been done through a process of harmonizing and looking at ideal processes that actually are acceptable to all auditors and all different rules and regulations throughout the agencies. So for that, we needed to come up with a memorandum of understanding that sets out provisions, the management structure, the individual and joint responsibilities, etc., etc. As you can imagine, that was quite an important exercise and quite time-consuming, but very important to do. Then obviously we have the go live, and we do a gradual implementation where we go for the services that are much easier to be implemented in terms of immediate results for the participating agencies. Because as you can imagine, agencies want to see a return on investment, because in order for the structure to work, agencies need to put money up front before they receive the service in order for the platform to work. So that was, as you can probably understand, those that have worked in operations a lot, most of our audience, that is a challenge in it by itself from a financial regulations and financial structure perspective in some agencies. And then obviously a big hurdle that we've now overcome in terms of procurement, for instance, that we have validated the harmonized procurement manual, and we have agencies like UNESCO, for instance, that want to use that manual already now across the globe for their agencies on the ground, to use that manual locally across other UNESCO offices, which is obviously what we want to see. The service lines, very briefly, I'm not going to read them out to you. You see them, operations, business operations staff, colleagues, you see them. Those are the services that we are doing right now in procurement, travel, ICT, and we are now thinking about rolling out for next year the human resource pillar. A lot of transactions, a lot of services have been done now for the past 6 months. The governance structure is also important to look at, because it's something that that is extremely important to secure agency buy-in, to secure this whole notion of it is a common platform where every agency is one voting equal member, where the RC is the chair of the Joint Operating Service Committee, the JOSC. Then you have the joint operating facility itself with the JOF manager that is basically interlinking between the OMT, and we created a joint operations manager task force, which basically unites all the operations manager for the participating agencies, and that's a key element, because they are resolving service performance issues, they are advising the JOF manager on a daily basis, almost continuous improvement of ideas and new requirements. Because as you can imagine, at the JOF steering committee, you have the agency heads that are sitting there, want to hear about strategic impact. Then basically the benefits, the benefits for now, very measurable benefits that we have already now after 6 months of live action. For a lot of agencies, and I can talk out of own experience in my role as deputy representative of UNFPA, and also other smaller agencies, UNEP, UN Women, and others, it strengthens the capacity to deliver our mandate. Because a lighter in-house operations footprint creates opportunities to focus on strategy, program, and advocacy. And that is a huge benefit for us, where our program staff that usually did a lot of transactions no longer have to do these transactions, and it frees up a lot of staff, especially for smaller agencies that are more technical of nature. Common operations can be managed better and most cost effectively by a single unit, because you have better oversight, you have the economy of scale. You can simplify the promotion of simplification with focus on quality processes that are under control, that are not across many different agencies. Flexible to change. Clients have a direct say on the performance and accountability of the services they receive. The joint operating facility is working on IT tools where clients can directly give feedback on the services and the quality of service, etc., that they receive. And you have a key element, which Lars touched on and the colleagues from Moldova touched on, which is often the reason for why we want to have shortcuts, or we are forced to simplify certain processes, which is we do not have, the OMT, for instance, is a voluntary group. We have people there with full-time jobs that have to go back to their agencies. If you have a dedicated common operations that are actually doing this as a full-time job, this dedication will bring important learning effects, will concentrate on the actual services, resulting in enhanced productivity and implementation of best practices. And this is a key element that we see here. We have a dedicated unit with dedicated full-time staff that are being paid to do these services for the common good, and that really makes a huge difference. And then obviously the harmonization and the common procurement at the country level. What I want to, just very briefly, I know I'm running a little bit late, but I want to show you here is this very important from a political perspective, from the agency headquarters perspective and the executive management of the agencies here. They want to see and want to know whether this is relevant for them. And so you can see the different grades of relevance on the path to relevance, from the startup to when the actual agencies are seeing the value for this platform. And you see the different lines from governance, automation, functional scope, staff development, etc., integration, to the different levels of how we're building up gradually. We are right now between basics in place and operations excellence, and we are working on that very hardly. So I know that in the audience, the JOF manager, Almir, is here, and I want to thank him for helping putting together this, this presentation. This is a key element to actually create this relevance for the participating agencies and build the base for more participation. We have 6 months of operations right now of the joint operating facility. I'm using one service, the procurement service. As you see, we have 143 processes, not transactions, processes across the 7 agencies for now, which I think is pretty good, considering that we're only really live and the staff is only really working in the job since the beginning of the year and having gone live on the 1st of March. And we continue. We have other agencies, UNICEF is coming on board now, etc., etc. So it's a pretty good start so far. But we've obviously got some learnings. I mean, we heard it from the Moldova example. Executive leadership is essential. If you don't have the leaders of your agencies stepping up and wanting to be innovative and not waiting for headquarters to say yes or no, that's what we need. We need local leaders and reps that are willing to take the initiative and be innovative and take the lead and ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission in most of the cases. Because a lot of it has to do with delegation of authority rather than huge differences between our rules and regulations. Communications is key for smooth delivery of service. Involve program staff. Huge learning from us here. We didn't involve program staff, and that's a typical error that we do. We need to involve program staff right from the beginning. As Lars said before, the client provider relationship is extremely important. If you don't involve program staff, you can set up a service platform, but at the end of the day, the service platform is serving our program. Huge learning. Very important point, mutual recognition versus lead agency. I can say to you very clearly from a political perspective, I would like to propose to get rid of the term, I know Jens was talking about it in the intro, let's not talk anymore about lead agency. Because lead agency sounds, for many different agencies, doesn't sound so attractive. Mutual recognition is what sounds attractive because it puts the onus on the richness of diversity across all agencies. We have a lot of agencies that have existing, effective, efficient processes across them. So it's not just the one agency that knows it all, that does it better in everything. So the mutual recognition of rules and regulations, whatever rule and regulation is better, is more attractive, is more efficient, avoids costs, is better for service delivery, go that way. It is a harmonization between harmonizing and mutual recognition. It's not an either or, but that's a strong learning that we have here. Educating of staff about processes, roles and responsibilities of the platform, promoting a culture of collaboration, continuous improvement through process design and using technology, and the focus, as Lars was saying, obviously on cost avoidance and improvement of quality. The next steps for us now are inventory of long-term agreements and looking for new ones, common vendor base, etc., etc. You can read it here. Tools, streamline the work between program and improve actions. I know I'm 10 minutes over, and I'm closing here to allow for questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was a okay. It was an abrupt ending, but a great presentation, Yves. Thanks.
I was acutely aware of me being 10 minutes over time, so.
I know. As long as everybody realizes it's all your fault, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, that concludes the webinar more or less. We're going to have a Q&A session. Again, I'm aware we're over time. It's a lesson learned. Next time we'll try to do it a bit more tight. Keep in mind this is the first time we're doing this, so it's a bit of a learning curve. I just got 2 closing remarks. The Brazil case, the JOV, the Joint Integrated Service Center, that's an exceptional case. The 95% of bosses don't have that. The BOS not necessarily does not mean you need to do an integrated service center. The BOS is a strategic planning tool. We just thought it would be good to showcase this, that what in certain countries a BOS can lead to, what kind of innovations are coming through. And we believe that the Brazil case, but also Vietnam, who also has an integrated service center, these are ways to deliver services in a more cost-effective way, which increasingly becomes more and more important. So it's important that you would know. And again, as Yves already said, Almir is online. He's the manager. He's doing an absolutely superb job in managing this complicated process. What we do see is that there are small mini service centers being set up, like joint procurement teams or an ICT team, which in a way is the same thing. You know, it's just for one service line, but it's the same principle. With that, I'll open it up for the questions. Let me see. I made a couple of notes throughout the presentation. I see a bunch of them coming in. Let me cover the ones that were posted first, and then we'll take it down. The first one was from Anne Romani, basically saying, okay, if HLCM has approved certain harmonization process, for example, in HR, we now have interagency mobility for G staff and national staff. But she's asking, okay, say that the HLCM approved that, what do you do if the agency reps say we can't do that, or our headquarters doesn't approve that? This is a thing you're going to bounce in with the BOS as well. I mean, we have had it all across all service lines. We can't do joint procurement. Yes, you can. Now the point is, how do you deal with that? The easiest way is to drop us an email, because we are sitting with the UNDG, with the top level executives in the different agencies. We can bring it up, and we will provide bilateral support to your countries to get a resolution. Usually we do it by mail first, and then possibly by telcon if needed, where we bring in the headquarters of the different agencies so we can actually have that discussion, how we can resolve that. But basically, if HLCM approves it, there is no way that an agency at the country level can say, no, we cannot do that. It may be that they don't want to do it for political or other reasons. Maybe those are valid or not, but then that's the reason, and it's not because an HQ doesn't allow that. But again, we can help you resolve that. The other question is some examples of low-hanging fruits. That's from Natalie Dietrich Jones. Don't know which country though. Low-hanging fruits differ by country, clearly. It depends a little bit on where you are as a starting, at the start out. Procurement for sure, the LTAs. I'm looking at Luigi now. I don't think we have any bosses that don't have procurement in their boss setup, LTAs. That depends a bit on the commodities and the service categories where you want to do it, but you see a lot of it in office supplies, fuel, hotels, conferences for sure. Security is usually there. All these different things that agencies, when they engage in together, they want to leverage their scale, their volumes, or they just want to do it more faster or quicker. Conflict countries have a different setup. There you'll see more light vehicle use, transport, For example, hitching a ride on a helicopter. If WFP has got helicopters there, how can other agencies use that? Which is a case from Afghanistan where we worked with them. So the low-hanging fruits are usually in procurement, ICT, and HR. And yes, I know HR is not the most popular area, but there you see consultants' databases that reduce the recruitment time, induction courses and training courses for staff learning, which means that agencies pool the money and pull in trainers around M&E or RBM or generic skill sets, induction courses. I'm a big fan of those. I started in Malawi in 2005, and we got an induction course from Malawians, and they explained how the culture works, which is very important when you start working on the programming. For example, in Malawi, HIV and AIDS education is done by grandparents, not by the parents, like in my own culture. That's kind of nice to know before you start programming, that you target the right stakeholders, that kind of thing. So induction courses are there. ICT service desks are a big one that we see a lot. Luigi, in the slides, we are sharing the slideshow, so no worries. The contact details, who to contact, how to do things are all in there, everything you saw. Luigi will share those with you, so you'll have them. Also, his graph shows you what kind of services have high frequency. Those tend to be the low-hanging fruits. Although we see now a wide variety moving into fleet management and other areas. Outcome level UNDAFs. Question also from Natalie Dietrich-Jones. How do you do that? Okay, so that's nice, all these program links, but what do we do if I have an outcome level UNDAF? The blunt truth is, if you have an outcome level UNDAF, your link to the program will get weaker because you lack the details. Now, as Natalie already indicated in her chat window, the joint annual work plans are useful, but that would mean you'll be linking it up at an annual work plan level, because the work plans you don't have yet when you do your UNDAF. So at the UNDAF BOS stage, the link will get weaker. That doesn't mean you cannot do a BOS. On the contrary, I mean, you can still do your BOS. It's just you'll need to facilitate those meetings a little bit more ad hoc. And the influence is one way. It goes from the UNDAF to the BOS, but the BOS will not be able to influence the UNDAF anymore because it's either locked down already, or you just don't have the details to influence it. But Natalie is right. The joint annual work plans are key in that because they will provide you that detail. And just a tip, the indicators are often very useful to get that detail. They'll tell you a little bit what exactly they're trying to do. Now from Eritrea, although I think they left already, what did they say? Oh, they wanted the contact details. Again, Luigi will share the PowerPoints, and they have all the contact details. At this point, I do want to say I'm transferring to Swaziland, so I'm joining the Swazi team there as deputy in UNDP. So most of the questions as of next week should go to Luigi, because I will be off the job. Although I can say it has been an absolutely great 5 years. I mean, we've done so much with the countries together in virtual teams that it's amazing. So I go with a heavy heart, as they say. Luigi is here looking at the questions. I got 3 remarks I wanted to make myself. Doing a BOS as a tick box exercise, please don't do it. Okay, I mean, either do it because you believe in it, because it believes it adds value, but if you're developing a shelf document, then don't bother. You'll be wasting your own time, you'll be wasting our time. Do it if you believe, in my vision, the BOS replaces pretty much anything else in common operations. This becomes the framework for the OMT based upon which you plan, you work, you report, and you create impact. But please don't do it as a tick box exercise. I've seen some pretty horrible BOSes, I've also seen some pretty good ones. In that regards, if you want to ask which countries are good, Tanzania has got a strong one. Uganda has got a strong one. I think Lesotho is pretty good. Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia is good. Moldova has got a good example of the light BOS. Sorry, now I'm saying it myself. Of the estimated BOS. There's several ones on the website that you can look at, and you can also mail us. We got a question around the funding. Yes, funding is weak. It has been definitely raised. It's on the map, actually. DOCO is now setting up a funding facility for a range of things, including business ops. The UNDAF Innovation Facility will keep on going as long as we have money. That requires you to have a BOS, otherwise you don't get access to the funding, and it requires you to use your CBA in your proposal. Good examples, Lesotho has done some pretty amazing stuff with Irakli and Christie and Acel, using the money from the UNDAF Innovation Facility, as does Tanzania and other countries. I mean, Fiji. So we provide money up to 70,000, I think. We do not finance your BOS development process. A, because we think it is cost shared by the UNCT. That's a sign of commitment as well. And B, you normally don't need that much money for it, with the exception maybe if you want to have a consultant, but those costs are fairly limited. Keep in mind it is a recorded webinar, so Luigi will send the link. You can also play it for your own team, for other people you want this to see, so you have it recorded. And the examples we highlighted are MIC, high MIC. Of course, the LICs are the biggest bosses, but they are the ones usually speaking already. So we wanted to give you a different flavor. But the examples I just mentioned, a lot of them are LICs, low-income countries. So you can find those on the website as well. Luigi, do we have other questions?
Yeah, we have plenty more. I don't think we have time to go through all of them. Let me see. I'm getting a little bit lost here.
Oh, there's not lost.
It's too much to handle now. I can take like two more, and then I suggest we just capture the questions, provide answers, and distribute it through our email list.
Let's go to 11.
Yeah?
10 minutes, and then we just get as far as we can.
Okay. Here's a question from Getachew Saleh. Forgive my pronunciation. There is a coordination cost from OMT and working group members. Where should we put in the CBA? You want to take that one?
Thanks for that.
Oh, I can take it too.
Coordination cost was raised in the independent evaluation. And if I see the name Getachew, I assume you're Ethiopia, or at least linked to Ethiopia. Coordination costs are not normally reflected in CBA. That's not to say you can't do it. It's just pretty hard to measure. If you can get estimates for the coordination costs, you can include it. But it's not as a standard. It's a discussion at the UNDG level still. The thing is, we do not measure coordination costs for the UNDAV either, or for the RCO work either. But it is an interesting question, and you can do it. You can use the same methodologies in terms of taking how much time it takes and then using real costing. If you know the level of the person, you can calculate how much time is involved in that. But just ask yourself the question: what do you want to achieve with determining that? If you got a good goal for it, you want to cost share it, or you just think it's good to know, then by all means knock yourself out and try it. I'll be interested to see it, but it's not a standard.
Okay, another question is, I saw above.
Take the next one, it's a nice one.
Yeah? Okay. How come the UN doesn't impose the joint office model to all countries? What can the OMT do to reinforce operational ownership of the UNCT and understanding in operations?
Can I take the first one?
Sure.
Listen, you got it is the UN. I mean, you guys all work with the UNCTs, and you've all stood in front of UNCTs with different agendas, different needs, etc. I think the Brazil and Vietnam models are the future for those countries that are MIC or have a smaller presence at a country level. In my eyes, we are no longer in a situation where we can retain our own individual support services, just plainly because we don't have the money. Switzerland, where I'm going, is one of them. There also we need to start thinking, okay, how are we going to finance this? I think a consolidated service desk in those setups makes sense. As I said, the way to do that is not to go big bang like Brazil. Just for the record, we spent 2 years designing that thing before it even went live. And that was with a very strong local team and support from our teams, intensely. Do it incremental. I mean, start with a joint procurement team or a joint ICT team. And then one by one, you can format these teams. And then you are, by de facto, creating the service center. So take that slow. We would love to impose it, but man, it's just politically, it's just not going to happen. It's the same with the BOS, the eternal fight. Should this be mandatory or not? In my eyes, it should be, but in the mind of many others, it's not. So now that's why we say highly recommended.
In a way, this is like delivering S1. Delivering S1 is not mandatory, but if you're smart, you do it.
It adds value.
It adds value, yeah. The other question on what an OMT can do to reinforce operational ownership, and this came from Alpha Diallo, and Alpha also had a question on what tips we have on enhancing program and operations collaboration. I think the key is to have an empowered OMT. This is actually one of the indicators. Is it an indicator? No, management best practices is to make sure your OMT is chaired by a head of agency in order to have the buy-in from the UNCT. Am I phrasing this right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. I mean, a head agency, deputy head, doesn't really matter. But for me, there are a couple of things. I mean, first of all, first and foremost, you need to establish the business case, how these services add value to each individual agency. And for procurement, for ICT, I mean, the beauty of business ops is it can be quantified. So often you can go to an agency saying, listen, by doing this, compared to your current scenario, you'll basically be cutting your cost. Or are we enhancing your quality by doing this X amount faster or better or in a different way? So it's also, the primary thing is to establish that added value for each individual agency. When I was in Papua New Guinea, I had decks for each agency. Because for a small agency, the benefits and the costs are different than for a larger agency. So you need to shape your arguments around that. I went and visited, it takes an hour. I would prepare a PowerPoint just for that agency, and I would visit the rep or the staff even, and I would line to them and talk to them about, like, okay, how this adds to your day. And these arguments vary from, I could tell finance staff or procurement staff, like, listen, I look at your overtime sheets, and rather than going home at 8 o'clock to be with your family with this kind of thing, we're cutting your labor time so much or the volume so much that you actually can go home at a normal time. That's one argument. The other argument with reps is more around the cost and the quality. So the arguments vary, but it definitely pays to talk to the individual agencies with the case according to them. What does it mean for you? Other parts, what Luigi said, is the chairing of an OMT by preferably a rep or a deputy rep. Another one is on the UNCT meetings that they have standard briefing, 10 minutes. Doesn't need to be every meeting, but at least once or twice a year. And use the BOS as an accountability tool. Put the data on the table, because you need to make it alive for a lot of reps, and a lot of reps do not have an operations background. At least not in most of the agencies I know. They come from a program background, which means they need to be educated just like everybody else.
There was one question on how we should foster heads of agencies or deputies to become heads chairing the OMT.
Yeah, I know. It's like pulling teeth. I mean, it's sometimes a dance. But again, it comes back to, I think, and Yves had some numbers in there, but a lot of the common operations, the smaller agencies have a pretty big stake because they don't run these massive setups themselves. It comes back to your business case. And in many cases, there will be agencies who have like a pretty large stake in to make this work. So again, I would pitch it, it's a one-time investment. Pitch it to the individual agencies, see indeed what their response is and how they see it, but also see the degree to which it benefits their particular agency. Again, UNDP's business case is very different from ILO's or UNESCO's business case. They have different setups. We can help you with that, but I do think they're humans, they're individuals, and they have their own incentive systems, and for a lot of them, they're under cost pressure at the moment, and that's a great driver for change. So you need to pick the one that is actually really has a benefit to make this happen. And to see common operations succeed. Use the RC, by the way, as well. In particular, if you got the RC on board, let them engage.
I see 3 more questions that pertain to different policies, procedures, and templates from participating agency. One is from Arietta Bakero, and I saw one up there. Sorry.
Okay, well, Luigi looks at that.
Yeah.
I see a question for conflict and transition. I guess it's Libya that we have online, but also Syria, Mali, Liberia finished it now. CAR is moving forward even. Let's take this offline. Drop us an email. It's a very particular setup. I mean, the basics still stand. But in particular, where you have a mission involved, the game becomes slightly different because you get a major new player in town. So let's take that offline. Drop us a mail and we'll have a bilateral telcon.
I think we should call it a day. French training. I see one last one coming in. French training is planned for end of October, I think. Probably in Senegal, Dakar.
Yeah. I'm now going to go at random through the question. There's many. Can you please share an agenda for BOS training? Oh yeah, maybe I didn't say that. We designed the decks, the PowerPoints. They're all ready. We got a 3-day training and a 5-day training. 5-day training, I highly recommend you only use roster resources because you need to be trained in a BOS for that. That goes into details with exercises. That's the one we use globally. That's a pretty hardcore training, but it's an absolutely great training, but I might be biased. Then the 3-day training is what we recommend for the countries. The decks are standard. We give you the decks. We can even give you somebody from the roster. So don't worry, like, oh shoot, now I have to like design a deck and I don't even know what to do. I also recommend look at the countries around you or mail us, Luigi in this case, and ask us which countries around me have a BOS, because we have tracking sheets that are real time. So we will advise you. Okay, touch base. We will actually facilitate that process. This specialist, we set up a telecom between you and the specialist and discuss the TOR, and then you take it forward from there. Michel Kouakou, yeah, you're trained and you're a French resource, so you see it in the chat window. He's one of our French resources. But we have rosters of trained people that go through pretty extensive vetting in both Spanish, English, and French. Templates, tools, guys, look at the new guidance that comes out next month. The current guidance is on the website. It has everything. It takes you step by step, step in hand, how to do each step with the templates, examples, the whole shebang. So I'm not going to cover that here now. Just check the guidance. UNDG have been developed for 2014, 2014-18. We do not have a roadmap. Yeah, if you're midstream, there's a bit of a philosophical difference within Doku even. If you're midstream, you can do two things. Either you wait for the new period. In my eyes, that's 2 years lost. That's just a pity. Some countries do a transitional BOS for 2-3 years, so they make it very narrow. But it helps to get the OMT adjusted to the process. What does it mean? You have your own lessons learned already. You do just a little BOS, a mini BOS. And meanwhile, you also prepare for the new UNDG cycle. You have already a lot of your data then, so you can start very quickly. We call that a transitional BOS. There's plenty of countries who had that, in particular in the first generation. My advice is to keep it very focused, though, because you'll have to go. You'll have to do it then for the UNDG cycle. Keep in mind that if your data is older than a year, it becomes much less useful. I've seen countries use data that's 3 years old. I'm not a fan of that. I mean, I think data has a shelf life of a year max. Any chance for consultants who supported different countries while developing their BOS to be included in the BOS roster consultants? Yes, they are. Get at you. I mean, most of the consultants, we got consultants like Anne Land, we got Anders Voigt, we got the Ugandan Stephen Sibale, was good. Most of these consultants on the rosters have done at least one BOS, if not many. I mean, Anne by this time has done 7. They charge between, we got some more junior consultants that are cheaper. I think they charge around $450 or something a day. They're good for the number crunching. And we got more senior consultants like Alexander McKinsey, who also did the BOS M&E framework. We got Anne Land, who did the independent evaluation. And they charge around $750 a day. But they're also very good to use in retreats and stuff, and they can do the crunching. So it depends a little on you. You just drop us the mail, and we'll send you 10 CVs, and you can do your desk review based on what you need. Spanish, talk to your regional UNDG. As Luigi said, there's a whole range of training set up for the LAC region. Maria Gualar and her team are coordinating that with us. Drop us a mail or drop them a mail. The presentation, the webinar will be shared by Luigi through some arcane ways. I don't know how that works, but you'll get, I think, a link or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a link. You'll get a link with all the stuff. Guys, I gotta call it a day. It's 11. We're half an hour over time. I got one question for you. Can you please, in the chat window, give us some feedback on the webinar? This is the first time we're doing this big one. Again, there were 500 submissions. I think 200 people in the end attended. That's actually a record for the UNDG, of which we're very grateful and happy. In the chat window, if you got some remarks, we already noted down the time management. But if you got some other feedback, good or bad, please type it in so we can make it better for you next time. Again, you can run the recorded version for your teams. And that's pretty much it. This is actually also my last act in the UNDG, because as of tomorrow, I'm no longer working here. So thanks, everybody. Those of you online that we worked with, we had an absolute great blast the last 5 years. And I think pretty much what this comes down to. I mean, if we are to support the SDG achievements as business operations people, we need to enhance our planning, the investment, the prioritization, and the management control of our business ops, based on the local context, of course. And the BOS is the instrument to do this. So if you want to go for an integrated service center all the way, that's fine. Then we need to talk more. But the BOS is a first step. With or without a service center, you need to consider this and discuss it internally. And again, as I said, DOCO is right behind you, and we provide the support we can, but you need to do it. So please consider this. And beyond that, thanks for a great 5 years. And I'm very much looking forward to great bosses. Thanks a lot.
Let's do what? The panelists have
Colleagues,